So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Phil Regnault, who is a marketing transformation partner at PwC, but he's also PwC's Adobe Alliance leader. How are you doing, Phil? And welcome to the podcast.
Good. It's good to be with you, Adrian.
Fantastic. Now, Phil, I know you're probably famous in your own lunchtime or so, but for people that are not familiar with your infamy, can you give me a little bit of a thumbnail sketch on you and your background so people get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, I'm famous at our dinner table for sure, but let me explain to the rest of your audience who Phil is. Phil is a global citizen. Phil is originally from the Netherlands, but has lived and worked in Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, the US. So I've traveled and worked across the world. I like to think that those experiences have amalgamated into giving me a certain perspective that I think is worth talking about. Professionally, that means that I initially in the early '90s was really on the forefront of the major geopolitical revolution that was happening at the time, the post-Soviet breakup, and I was helping their economies transition to a free market model.
Mm-hmm.
And then the turn of the century, I decided that other revolution called the internet and digital business was fascinating, and I had to be a part of that. So like everyone else pursuing that gold rush, I moved out to Silicon Valley and spent time at the dawn of CRM with Siebel Systems, spent time with Oracle as well. And then after 20 years in high tech, I decided it's time to go back into consulting. I've got something to say there. I've really enjoyed the last 8 years being back at PwC, my original home, working with my clients on tackling their toughest, their gnarly marketing challenges.
Awesome. Now, the reason why we wanted to have you on the podcast is because I know that you've recently published the results of PwC's 2025 Customer Experience Survey. Now, it's a US focused kind of survey, but I wanted just to kind of explore some of the findings and things. But before I do that, there's a couple of things I wanted to dive in on. But I wanted to ask you, tell me a little bit more about the research, some of the main headlines coming out of it.
Sure. Yeah. It's a survey that we do periodically. In this case, we surveyed over 5,000 consumers and 400 or so executives. So we're getting both sides of the coin here, not just the enterprise perspective, but those that consume the brands as well. And what we found this year was something pretty staggering, not new per se, it's just more accentuated than in previous editions of the survey. And that is that there is a pretty stunning disconnect between the sense that the C-suite have with respect to how their brand is performing, and particularly the type of loyalty that it's engendering with their consumer base versus what the consumers themselves are saying. It's a 50% gap. It's really quite remarkable.
50% gap. I mean, it's a bit of a common theme sometimes when you see these research coming up. I mean, I remember kind of like one of your competitors, I think it's probably Bain back in the day, that said,
great firm,
80% of leaders think they're doing a great job. And at the time, it was like 8% or something of customers went, okay, you're doing a great job. And you're like, going,
yeah.
So if you want to take a positive spin on it, you can say the gap's possibly getting smaller. Maybe not so positive.
I suppose that's very punk of you to say, Adrian. That interpretation. I don't know if I'm that charitable in my view. I think it's more like that. That meme that goes around the web with that dog that's sitting in the middle of the fire and claiming that everything's fine. I think that's what we're in basically. Yeah. I think CX is on fire, not in the good way. No, but this in all earnestness, this should be a warning sign to executives that they're just off.
Yeah.
And it's not an unsolvable problem. Like we said, it's not new per se. Others are coming up with the same findings, which only supports this as not being an outlier, but something that we should probably accept as fact, and something that really should be worked on with urgency and I think at least his level of prioritization.
And so I wanted to dive into a little bit because there's a couple of things in the main report that stood out and sort of speak to that theme. And it said that 70% of executives say customer expectations are evolving faster than their company can adapt. I mean, that in itself is a worrying stat. But I wanted to understand, I don't think there's a lack of desire sort of there, because I think the desire is there. But I wanted to understand is there anything that you're seeing in particular that companies are doing that's hindering their ability to keep up?
When you say there's no lack of desire, you mean desire to engage their customers
Yes, indeed.
in a more positive way? Yeah.
I mean, again,
yeah.
I may be being positive about it.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, after all, if you're really the reason for being for any business is to engage customers and hopefully to retain some profit from that engagement. That's it in a nutshell. And so I think it's worth calling out that they want to do that, that there is that desire, like you say, but they're just, I think, indexing on the wrong things right now. So especially if we look at things through the lens of loyalty programs, they're really looking more for, I just think they're measuring the wrong thing. They're looking at things like membership expansion or number of transactions that find their way into some kind of a loyalty pattern. But that doesn't focus on what the experience is. And I think that the distraction away from focusing on the right experience is a problem. Now, that said, this notion that 7 out of 10 executives say that they can't keep up rings a bit defeatist to me. Sounds like an excuse because surely they can if they truly have the wherewithal and the desire to do it. Too many executives allow for silos to persist organizationally, and over the decade and a half that you've been doing this podcast and having CX conversations, you've heard this over and over again. The relationship with a customer is made or broken at the experience level. It's not membership in a program or anything like that. And that means that we have to get over the silos that exist from a functional perspective, but also get past the silos that ultimately manifest themselves in how data and content is organized. Data and content really lie at the root, ultimately, of being able to create a great omni-channel experience for their customers. The other thing is that there's this thing called AI, Adrian, that's
really
taken the market by storm right now. Yeah, look, we made it 5 minutes without talking about AI, but good for us. But there's this sense that consumers are embracing AI faster than companies can. And so that's where maybe this sense of I just can't keep up because should it be ChatGPT or should it be Gemini? Or should it be Llama? What models should I be working with? Should I be working with any models? The answer doesn't lie in the models. The answer lies in what you do with that. And the answer also lies in retaining a human connection with your customers and not defaulting or deferring rather to the algorithm to govern that interaction. But I think that the pace at which AI is developing, the pace at which you and I and consumers are using it in our daily lives is intimidating to a lot of executives. But they'll catch up to that. I don't think that's a permanent lag. I think they will catch it. We're already seeing evidence of that. But my thesis anyway is that that's why they feel like they just can't keep up. It's not really that the expectations are changing on the part of customers. We like to say that, but I don't know if they really are. Customers' expectations are actually pretty fundamentally basic and consistent over time. They just want to be remembered and treated respectfully and have their problems, good or bad, resolved quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is so. I have a thing that I trot out every now and again, where I say that the future of customer experience is always built in the present. And what I mean by that is that if we don't attend to the problems that customers have today, then we potentially forfeit our right to expand on and or develop that relationship tomorrow. And it speaks to also this almost a competing tension that happens at an organizational level around priorities. And too many people get caught up in the maelstrom that is evolving technology, and it's this kind of like almost typhoon right now.
Yeah.
And they get consumed by that, but then they forget about the here and now in many ways. But actually the people that win are the ones that are actually trying to manage that competing kind of tension about, i.e. focusing on making things better today but then also building for the future as well. And I think that becomes it's a really difficult sort of tension to navigate. But I think that for me, that feels like a thing that's central to this is almost a bit like understanding the kind of landscape that you're playing on, but actually making sure that you're striking that delicate balance between improving today, but also building for tomorrow.
And that's right. The key thing that consumers are looking for is loyalty from the brand to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll return the favor,
mm-hmm.
if you will, by expressing loyalty by repeat choice, or by actually being willing to pay a higher price for a product or service because they feel like the brand is loyal to them, or they have a viable alternative, but they decide that they're going to stick with the brand. And that's something that isn't actually measured by the brands as much.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to your point about staying in the here and now, but building for the future, I think that's really where a lot of experience modalities, let's say, portray themselves. They're really focused on today being the endpoint, which is a transaction, as opposed to building up a relationship for the long run. I like to say that brands should embrace this notion of memory as a service.
Okay.
Where the idea being that if you know that you remember this customer through action or through an offer or something like that, then I think you'll engender loyalty that is of a more voluntary nature than one that feels like, oh, okay, I'm just participating in this program because I'm being slotted into some predefined CRM journey, and that's the story. Then you feel like you're a cog in their machine as opposed to that they're serving you.
Yeah.
And so I think that notion of the long term really matters. And just on the here and now, I've been toying with this new concept, Adrian, and I'm curious what your take on it is. And that is that we've come out of this era over the last 10 years, let's say, where a lot of brands have been focusing on their data, their customer data, whether it's first party data, you hear this term zero party data thrown around, or second or third party data. Doesn't matter. But data has been an intense focus. Data, though, if you stitch together a customer data graph, it gives you these abstract, dispassionate points. I think that they don't bring in all the data that you need, though, in order to create an experience. And I think we've been over reliant on the pure customer data and not looking at context.
Yeah.
Context being, where are we on our product development roadmap? What is happening in society and the culture around us? What is the cultural affinity of this customer segment that I'm looking to treat, as opposed to what are they like as individuals? We all belong to some kind of a tribe. And I think trying to find that where we're placed there will allow you to pinpoint your customer targeted activities in a more precise manner and in a manner that feels less transactional too.
I think that's right. A couple of things occur to me on that is that the contextual data, contextual intelligence, I think is almost the next step forward. Right. For particularly a personalized experience. And I don't mean that in a marketing sense, I mean across the board.
Right. Yeah.
And adding that context, and it's not just the individual context, but also the kind of group dynamics and, affinities that lie in that. And I think that's absolutely emerging. And I think it's being accelerated by some of the capabilities that we're seeing develop in that sort of AI sort of like space. Yeah. But there's one thing that's always concerned me about the data side of the things, and it goes back to an idea that I remember speaking to. It was a guy who was called Yasha Kikas Wolf, who was the CMO at Mozilla kind of years and years ago.
Yeah.
And he talked about this idea about lean data. And it's the idea that people are going, they've got more data than they know what to do with.
Right.
And rather than actually going, let's start from the data kind of perspective, I sometimes think they miss a step where we're going, well, what is it that we actually want to do?
That's right. Yeah.
And I always think that it's like, because people go, let's figure out all this data and then we can figure out what we can do with it. Rather than going, why don't we figure out what we want to do and the service and the experience we want to deliver, and then think about the data that we need to deliver that, and then the tools and things that are going to help facilitate that. And so it feels like, so I always think that we get this data, technology, and then experience continuum, but it should be almost the other way around.
Absolutely should be the other way around.
Like start with the experience and then think about what is the, the tools that you need to deliver on that, what data needs to go into those kind of tools in order to deliver the experience. And that's where I think many people, it feels to me that many people are going wrong. They're trying to tackle all of the data and all the data silos and everything else. And once they've done that, they're going, okay, now what? Okay, let's just turn the handle and then see what happens.
Yeah.
Rather than being almost like completely vision and then strategy led, and then thinking about from a lean data perspective, what are the things, what do I need? Because then at least that way you start thinking about where are the gaps that I need to fill in order to fulfill this kind of desire about the experience I want to try and deliver.
Spot on. Experience has to come first, and I think that the corollary observation would be that means by definition, the human stays in the loop. That's the proverbial concept that a lot of people are espousing right now for good reason, because I think it matters. If we aggregate all that data and then defer to the algorithm to decide what the optimal experience is, it's going to feel like it was generated by AI. We can discern that right now. So I think the combination of human ingenuity, human creativity, plus the data, I do like that lean data concept, because it means that you're not necessarily just putting everything into the soup, but you're actually making a soup that has just the right ingredients.
Right.
It's not just just unloading the entire spice drawer in there. I think that's what needs to be done.
It can be a more cost-effective approach because you're only using the data that you need, and it's going to save on kind of like storage and kind of like compute and all of these different things. It might even reduce latency because actually you're working with a more refined sort of data set. And so I think it's an interesting kind of thing. I think it's but the whole data side of things I think it's fascinating, but it's a drum I've been banging on about, kind of people getting the wrong way around for some time. But I wanted to circle back on something you said about loyalty and about the solving the wrong kind of problem, because there's other kind of stats in the reports that said like 9 out of 10 execs say that customer loyalty has grown in recent years, but only 4 in 10 consumers say the same.
Right.
But then you also kind of said that earlier, you said the loyalty programs are in danger of solving like the wrong kind of problem. And so is it that help me understand kind of what's going on here. And is it that the windows kind of shifted in terms of what loyalty is, and brands haven't actually kept up, as it were? They're still almost like earning loyalty points or that type of approach. And actually it's moved to a more relational sort of thing, and they haven't quite gotten it, and they're sort of like stuck in the past. Is that what's going on, or is something else going on there?
I think it's just a focus on maybe the wrong loyalty. There's loyalty with a capital L and lowercase L.
Right.
The capital L would be the loyalty program, the points, the status that I can earn. Loyalty with lowercase L is really where you want to be. You want to achieve that loyalty because that feels more voluntary. You're creating a coalition of the willing, basically, among your customers.
Yeah.
But nearly a third of consumers say that they will stop using or buying a brand if they have a poor experience. And it does not matter whether they're a member of a loyalty program. If they have a bad experience, it's over. That means that the loyalty program doesn't really serve your ultimate goal, which is to retain. You're just rewarding them based on a transaction that happens in the past. To your earlier point, it's not actually building anything for the future per se, because you live and die by a good or bad experience. Over half of consumers say they'll walk away from a product or from a brand if they've had one bad experience with that product too. So they're maybe not focused on the wrong thing. And I'm not suggesting that you toss out all your loyalty programs, but I wouldn't consider it the panacea, the thing that's going to solve all your customer experience problems. It's one component of a more holistic approach, which has to include more of that human connection and also deferring some of the control over the buying cycle to the consumer, not feeling like they're being sold to, but feeling like they're being helped, being aided in making their own voice.
Yeah. What it also feels like is that people are, like earning points and status and things, but it also, going back to that kind of point that we talked about before, it ignores some of the contextual stuff where, many consumers are under budgetary pressures. And that's one of the kind of things that drives kind of them first and foremost. They might go, oh, I need to do this. And then they think, oh, who have I got a scheme with? But then if somebody's come in at a quicker, easier, cheaper sort of like kind of way, then it almost, because of where they are in their buying cycle, as it were, then that can trump all of that. And I don't know if brands are being responsive enough in order to deal with some of that, the contextual kind of changes that are going on, particularly at an economic level.
Right. And that's why I was to finish my thought on that evolution from the original focus on creating your customer data graph. I think now it's time to put content and culture knowledge graph together that provides that context, marries it with the core customer data, but also your company's values and decision criteria, and which relates to how you're empowering your employees to actually act on those values. That's what I think is needed. That's the next evolution, I think, in great marketing, is to provide that context to create an experience that is tailored to the moment with immediacy. So there's a new KPI I've been throwing around, which is time to understanding.
Okay.
So instead of looking at, or maybe in addition to looking at things like NPS and CSAT and other measures of customer experience, from an operational point of view, can you reduce the amount of time it takes for you to be responsive? That was the word that you use. And can you validate with that customer that they feel like they were heard and had their need solved in a timely fashion? If you can solve that time to understanding, then I think you're on the right path.
Nice. Now, another kind of the survey was published, was it a wee while ago, a couple of months ago or so?
Yeah.
But actually, more recently, you've released a fresh cut of the survey, and it featuring exclusive insights from Adobe users. Now, I know a little bit about Adobe, and I wanted to understand, why did you do that? And when you say Adobe users, what do you mean? Just so we're kind of clear, is this people that are on the kind of the Adobe like AEM sort of platform, or what are we talking about here?
We're talking about users of Adobe Digital Experience products. So in the Experience Cloud, which would include AEM, like you talked about, might also include the use of the Adobe Experience Platform, real-time CDP, Target Analytics, Workfront, all of that. We're not talking about users of Photoshop or
So it's
Acrobat.
like enterprise kind of users of their kind of marketing, sort of like and experience kind of like tools and technology.
And the reason is not that Adobe per se is the end all be all for that, but I think it's a very useful proxy for, so users of Adobe products, I think are useful proxy for any company that is, let's say, towards the leading edge of applying technologies to enhance their marketing operations and ultimately to enhance the customer experience. That was our thesis going into it. And then when we did the cut, it's basically the same data set that we talked about before with our customer experience survey. We looked at just the subset of those users who self-declared that they, or the respondents rather, who self-declared that they used these Adobe products. Our thesis was borne out. So across the board, users of those products showed that they were ahead in using journey mapping tools, for example. It may feel like a truism, if they're an Adobe customer, they're using that. But we also know from other research and certainly all the conversations that you've had over the years that journey mapping is one of those foundational things. It's not, again, it's not the end all be all, but not doing it is not going to be terribly helpful to developing a great customer experience. So the
Right.
fact that Adobe users are using that and then narrow the gap in their own loyalty and their consumers' loyalty, I think there's something to be taken away from that. They also use more social media listening and analytics tools,
Okay.
53% versus 43%. And they also have 10 points more use of customer service management systems. So there's something there. Maybe some of that is attributed to the fact that they're using specifically Adobe products.
Mhm.
And again, we could also, I think, infer that this is a good proxy for those that are just on the leading edge of using digital marketing and digital experience solutions.
So it feels like it's, yeah, as you say, it's like a proxy for almost a maturity, given that the Adobe platform and its the tool set is one of the leading players in that sort of like type of, in that sort of like space. And so using that and then leveraging the capabilities and then sort of almost like matching that against customer expectations and deliverable outcomes and things, it feels like it's a proxy for people that are doing this and doing that are having better kind of results as that sort of as almost like a, as you say, a proxy for kind of like for maturity. But the which is interesting. So it's a bit like almost if you have, it feels like if you're adopting some of the most, if you like, comprehensive tools and using the most of their kind of ability in a joined up kind of like way, then you're likely to be driving kind of better outcomes and reducing that gap between expectations and what you're being able to deliver.
And I think this is ultimately, outside of delighting customers, the most important thing for an enterprise ultimately is to make profit.
Sure.
And I'll introduce just a different survey that we did as well. We recently published an analysis that we did in partnership with the ANA based on years of data from Cannes Lions winners.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, winners or those that placed in the competitions there would be generally considered as leading marketers. What we found is that in that data set, where, by the way, you're going to find a very heavy use of Adobe products as well, they had a 79% higher return on their marketing activity. On higher shareholder value return overall than those that didn't. And we believe that this is actually a watershed moment in analysis of marketing's contribution to the enterprise, because, as you know, and many of your guests lament about, marketing doesn't have, let's say, a consistent seat in the C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do, their asks for investments and their claims of success are often viewed with some skepticism.
Sure.
Which is fair in some ways because of some of the, let's say, stretching that's done in arriving at the right metrics. But what we proved with this data is that if you, as a marketing leader, and that in and of itself is all discussion of what does it mean to be a marketing leader, but if you do that, you're going to generate almost twice as much return to your shareholders than if you're a marketing laggard. I think that that's really, really important for the CMO to be able to puff out their chest a bit more and claim the importance and value, and also retain the gains that they're generating in order to reinvest in marketing and create this reinforcing loop that allows you to then obviously, ultimately, hopefully, if you're focused on the right things, deliver a better customer experience also.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the ROI is a perennial sort of challenge in the service and experience sort of space. Doesn't matter whether you sit in service ops or you sit in kind of marketing. It's always a challenge. And the closer we can get to, if you like, causative or causal links between activity and returns, and the more robust they are, the better. And that's like the perennial kind of challenge. But I I sometimes think that many people don't build good enough business cases. It's almost like assumed if we do this, then this is going to happen. But it sometimes it doesn't bear decent scrutiny.
No, that's right. And then as you said, then there's this age-old problem of marketing attribution, which is very, very difficult. It's difficult enough in the B2B space where you have, I think, theoretically a more robust way of measuring things, but in the consumer space, it's very hard. And which is why in this study we decided we weren't going to look at attribution as a means of justifying marketing. Shareholder return is ultimately what the CEO, what the board, what the shareholders care about. And if we can prove that if you're a great marketing company, you deliver more shareholder return, then it's end of story. Forget about attribution around a specific campaign or an event or a piece of content. We focus on the bigger picture and trust that the marketers are getting the marketing mix right, delivering the right content at the right time through the right channel to the right recipient. But here, I think it's incontrovertible truth. And again, I think it's a watershed moment for marketing to actually have this proof point that they can glom onto and say, "See, I told you so." Marketing matters.
I'll make sure we can get the link, include that in the highlights.
Cool. I'll send it to you.
And so one final thing on that can report, because I also noticed that there was a statement in there, which I thought I actually really liked. And I want you to explain it a little bit to me. And it says, chatbots have their place. But if that's the extent of your AI use for CX, you're probably in trouble.
Yeah.
And I was a bit like, okay, come on, Phil, tell me what you're talking about.
Is that too much?
No, it was just, I mean, it's not enough. I mean, I would have turned up the
volume. Yeah. Look, if you're forcing an interaction to happen through an AI chatbot, first of all, it's impersonal, but it's and truth be said, in their current setup, the experience for a consumer is generally going to lag expectations. Just not great. You know, I mean, my personal experience with chatbots just isn't that good, especially if they're forced on me. But they're getting better. It's just that there's this sense now, because billions of people around the world now are familiarizing themselves with LLMs and they're directly interacting with it. There's a feeling among brands then that means that we want to interact with some kind of AI algorithm as we interact with a brand. And I think that is a leap that they're making that just isn't true. When I call customer service for whatever my need is, I want to get to a human as fast as humanly possible. If I have a problem that I can address in a time sliced manner and it's pretty basic, maybe an AI chatbot would be okay. But I think there's a danger in having AI be your front line.
Okay.
I believe that AI is a profound contribution to the evolution of technology, but probably humankind. But it needs to sit in the background.
Right.
It can't be your brand.
Yeah.
And that's what we mean with, if you rely on chatbots let alone exclusively, but even materially as being the sole way of deploying AI, because it's demonstrable. And so you can tell people in the ivory tower that you've deployed AI, yay me. And I think you're going down the wrong path. The real value of AI lies in what it does internally with your systems and enabling humans to create and deliver better experiences. So that's really what I mean there, is just don't allow the chatbot to be your front line.
Yeah.
Exclusively.
I mean, I think, I would probably agree with that. I mean, I think I would agree with the idea that things are getting better. I think I would agree with the idea that given people's experience, defaulting to self-service feels like a natural sort of thing. Can I help myself before trying to wait in a phone queue? The problem is that, and almost that it's a bit like technology, funnily enough, is the thing that's trained us to go and search for answers. And so the obligation then is, if you want people to self-serve, then make the self-serve stuff easy.
Yeah.
And make it hum and make it kind of like, so whether it's a chat interface, whether it's a knowledge base, whether it's this, that, and the other, because like going, make sure it kind of works. I think there was a piece of Gartner research from earlier this year or so that said 70% of customers kind of want to solve their own kind of like problems. They want to self-serve, but yet only about 17% of them were able to solve that, even just simple queries, kind of like using these self-service sort of tools. And then when you change the sort of some of the criteria and say, look at even the most simple, the most simple kind of queries, only 30% were able to solve their queries. So it's a problem of the almost the it's not the problem of the technology at its core. It's the problem is almost how it's deployed and how it's designed and how it's kind of like delivered. So that's what that's what kind of I believe. I think there's, again, there's that expectation. People just want it to work. They want to help themselves. They want it to work, and then brands are just kind of like, they're rushing and they're failing, to give people what they want, or they get carried off on this new meme or new notion around, everything needs to have a chat interface. You're like going, that feels a little bit like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, why don't you kind of get to a point where like it takes a while to type something, but if you know from your predictive analytics that these are the top 5 things that people are getting in touch with you today, why don't you signpost that to people in that chat interface? Go like, most people are calling us about one of these things. Help us understand that. And so it feels like we're almost like over indexing on this sort of generative AI sort of interface type of things, and losing some of the good stuff that we've used in the past, some of the rules-based or the analytics-driven sort of like stuff. And so I feel like we're in this, again, a mini maturation sort of phase within a broader sort of like arc of development. And so, but yeah, if you're defaulting just to go, oh, it's just a chatbot and everything's going to be a chat interface, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
You're looking for the tool to solve your problem rather than actually understanding what the problem really is.
That's right. And you're using a tool that just maybe isn't quite ready for that. And the pace of evolution in the LLMs and in the AI space more generally is staggering, like we've talked about, and it's getting better, and it's getting better every day, it seems. But it just isn't as good as the human interaction. That's it. If we just project into the future, like a future website doesn't look like the websites that we see today, where it's basically most of it is static content. I think most websites probably will end up being a single prompt, like your Google front page, for example, and you just say why you're here, what kind of information you want, and then a website is served up dynamically to serve that very precise purpose. And it's also matched up with what the content and knowledge graph knows about you contextually, like we talked about before. I think that is the future. We're not quite ready for that. It's a bold move, and technically, I think that's difficult to accomplish. Culturally, maybe too, because people become so accustomed to this glossy magazine that is our website. But I think that eventually, though, we'll morph into something that is more of a dynamic, interactive experience that is guided by the visitor as opposed to the brand.
Yeah, I mean, so I see that sort of possibility kind of coming, but and I don't think that's wrong. I'm not sure if it will go there wholesale, because I think there's a thing around discovery from other kind of means where somebody goes, oh, you should check these people out because of this, and then that whole kind of visual experience around how do I discover sort of things. How do I know what to ask for if I don't know what I'm looking for, type of thing.
And then you default to I'm just visiting, and then you'll get the static site.
And the thing, so that kind of that signposting and navigating sort of thing is that it might be a case of, here's the thing, I know what I'm looking for, or I'm just visiting, or I'm browsing.
Yeah.
A bit like when you go into a shop, right? Somebody goes like, how can I help you today? I'm like, just browsing, or I'm looking for this.
That's right. It's funny you bring that up, because I was thinking about various metaphors and analogies that can bring home some of these points. And I was actually thinking about that sales clerk in a store who's trying to be helpful, and just by trying to be helpful, they're being distinctly unhelpful. That's what we want to avoid.
But it's almost
with
like, but it's
chatbots.
nice to be asked, I guess, if somebody's kind of
Sure.
saying it. So somebody comes up and you do it in different ways, and somebody goes like, "Hey, Phil, you cool?
Yeah.
Or can I help you with
Yeah.
something?" And you're like, "No, I'm cool,"
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
just like leave you to it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I'm over
That's
here
why
if you need something.
that's why I think every marketer should work in customer service at some point. For me, spent a year waiting tables and bartending, and I learned so much, Adrian, doing that, and I apply it in a lot of my personal and professional life now. It teaches you empathy, and that ultimately you will learn when it's the right moment to apply a little pressure to get a sale versus just kind of hanging out in the background and just serving a more humble way.
So, Bill, so we're talking a lot about, outcomes and sort of technology, and particularly, and also a bit about AI. And there's lots of different stories that many organizations are struggling to scale their AI projects and generating these meaningful commercial returns or drive improvements. I mean, you're in amongst the weeds in some of this with many kind of brands, and I'm sure you're seeing some successful companies. What are they kind of doing to scale projects, to generate meaningful returns, to drive those improvement in outcomes? Is there a couple of things that you go, these are some of the key tactics and strategies that they're employing?
There's a few things that come to mind. First, and I think foremost, actually, is to finish that story of that we were focused on data and data almost exclusively. Now we're much more focused on content, and I think merging a focus on customer data and market intelligence with content and developing approved content at scale and at speed to enable a truly personalized experience, or at least, if not one-to-one personalization, some birds of a feather kind of scenario. That's really important. So this more holistic view of the marketing inputs being data and content, and focusing on your internal content supply chain. The second piece is not deferring to the AI like we talked about before, but rather merging it with human judgment. And where possible, where financially viable, retaining humans as the interaction or conversation.
Yeah.
And then lastly, measurement. That won't come as a surprise, but any worthwhile activity be measurable and deliver the right results. Just going back to our earlier conversation about this other study that we did, that measurement need not be down in the weeds, as you say, focused exclusively on attribution. That may be helpful to determine whether or not a specific marketing activation was helpful, or whether a piece of content is resonating in the market. But rather, we should be looking at bigger contributions to the overall business, and then trusting marketers and CX experts to do the right thing to contribute there.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Great advice. So that's it for my main questions. I mean, but before I ask you some quick fire ones, anything else you'd like to highlight that we've missed out?
I mean, I've got reams of data to talk about, but let's share those with your listeners. Point them to their studies. Then, but I think the big takeaway here, from my perspective anyway, is let's focus more on this contextual knowledge and build this knowledge and culture graph, match it up with content, and I think then we'll be on to something really cool.
Awesome. So here's my quick fire questions. So the first one is that I always ask people to kind of boil everything kind of like down, to give me their best advice. That was my wife coming in. She forgot what was on this. And she was on the phone, and she was like came in, oh no, I'm going back out again. But that's fine. We'll probably leave that in. So boiling everything down, I want to ask you, what would be your best advice to someone listening in that wants to improve their customer experience? And the way I've been doing this is asking people to complete the sentence. And the sentence is, if you want to improve your customer experience, Phil says, do this, ... complete that sentence.
Phil says, get over yourself.
Love it. Full stop.
I mean, look, customer experience is delivering a great customer experience is about having and acting on empathy.
Mm-hmm.
It is about honing your listening skills, not your talking skills. And too often we're just focused on what we want to get out as opposed to how we ingest the knowledge from the customer, and not to over index on so-called optimizing. And for the listeners, I'm holding up air quotes, optimizing your internal operations as opposed to optimizing for a fabulous customer experience. It takes a leap of faith
Mm-hmm.
to invest in customer experience and believe that there will be a payoff. But there is a higher probability of success than if you optimize for your internal operations, because then you're virtually guaranteeing waving the white flag. You're saying, look, what matters more to me is my operational efficiency than delivering a great customer experience. Now, for some businesses, that may be the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you espouse to be a great CX company, you have to get over yourself.
Awesome. And so the second question is a punk question. Obviously, it's Punk CX podcast. And what company or brand, or I mean, even if you don't name them, then tell me a story about a brand that you think is taking a more punk approach to CX and why.
I'll cite a few examples. So one just happened a couple of days ago. Took my dog, his name is Leo,
Mm-hmm.
to on a ride. We're going through a park, and we stopped by a well-known coffee chain, with some green branding.
There you go.
And they gave my dog they call it a pup cup, a little bit of cream for the dog. I went there because of that. I didn't actually want coffee,
Right.
but I spent probably $5 or $6 on some fancy latte drink because I knew that I could make my dog really happy.
There you go.
It had nothing to do with points that I was earning. It wasn't convenient even to go there. I went out of my way to make my dog happy. Now that brand doesn't know that I have a dog. That person knew because I had a dog in the front seat next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they were empowered to spend a little extra of their company's money to make my dog happy. And they know that if you make a dog happy, you're making the dog owner happy as well, right? But I think that's a punk move. On the B2B side of it, another example, this goes back a while. This is actually, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago. But that shows you how meaningful this experience was. At the time, I was running a marketing organization and had just signed a new contract a subscription really to customer data from a certain data provider. The day after I signed that contract, I got a note from the CEO of the company with his phone number, expressing gratitude for me having signed on and offering his personal support to make sure that our onboarding with the data and our ongoing use of it would be satisfactory. And as a marketer, I was so intrigued by it. I thought that was a punk move that he gave his own phone number out.
Yep.
And so I took him up on it. I called him and he picked up.
Nice.
And I respected his time. It just took 60 seconds of his time, really just to express my appreciation and admiration for what he did there. I thought that was a punk move. It stuck with me a decade later. And I think there's a nice lesson for us all to take away from that, which is ultimately the magic is made through the human to human connection, and everything else is noise. We can enhance that human to human connection with great technology and great strategy, but it really comes down to the people ultimately.
100%. Nice one. And the final question before we wrap up now. It's a funny old world. Lots of doom scrolling going on every morning over kind of tea or coffee, wherever your beverage of choice. So I've been asking people to share with me a good news story to finish off our conversation. And so, Phil, can you tell me a good news story? Tell me something that's you've seen in the last week or so that's interesting, positive, or exciting, and just made you smile.
been through some personal stuff this year. 2025 has been a difficult year. And here in the States, we celebrate Thanksgiving at the end of November. A lot of people describe it as their favorite holiday because it's not tied to any kind of other event or religion or anything like that. It's just tied to giving thanks. And the good news that I experienced last week was the expression of thanks that was just flying over text messages, over the web, over in personal conversations. And I know that that is expected during the week of Thanksgiving, at least here in the US, but it often stops there. So I'm sharing that good news because I just saw a lot of light last week and experienced it for myself in a moment where I needed it. And my hope is that people keep that sense of gratitude beyond just the Thanksgiving week and going into the Christmas season and whatnot, and making sure that we're grateful for the light that's around us and the customers that grace us with their relationships also.
What a great note to end on. So thank you for sharing that, Phil. And also thank you for congratulations on the reports and the surveys. There's some great data in there. We'll point people to those kind of like reports in the highlights. I just want to say thank you for sharing your time and your insight and your perspective with me today. It's been great. It has been lovely chatting with you.
Same, Adrian. Hope we get a chance to do it again.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.